Hi everyone, this is CJ with Cyclotron. I thought I'd do a quick follow-up video to my recent "Does Harley Davidson have a Bud Light problem?" which had an overwhelming response. Comments, along with additional research that I've done, led me to examine the question, is Harley Davidson already a woke corporation under the leadership of CEO Jochen Zeitz? He's been CEO since 2020. And unfortunately, the answer is a shocking yes, but perhaps that's not surprising. But I don't want to tell you all my views about this stuff. I'm going to lay out the information from Zeitz giving interviews, what's posted on Harley's website, as well as some additional background on Jochen Zeitz and what's driving this whole agenda. So you have all these major corporations parroting the same type of language. A lot of this language comes from the United Nations, if you can believe that. But they keep talking about their stakeholders, environmental, social, governance, basically the New World Order on steroids. And it's tied into the banks, the investment firms, the stock market. It's all tied together. So I pose the question, is Harley Davidson a woke corporation, particularly under the leadership of their German-born CEO, Jochen Zeitz? And I want to make this as objective as possible. I mean, I've done a lot of research. I've already reached a lot of conclusions here, but I just want to present this information to you. Let you judge for yourself. So let's start out on Harley Davidson's website. They've got what they call inclusive stakeholder approach. So they say beyond sustainability and ESG, again, environmental, social, and governance, we seek to drive the desirable positive impact for our stakeholders based on this simple premise: we all do better when all are included. They keep talking about inclusion and belonging, blah, blah, blah. I mean, look, I'm all for diversity. I think you need to reach out to a broader customer base. You need to have a workforce that's engaged, and I can't imagine these days though that it's that much of an issue. I mean, why do all these corporations keep talking about diversity and inclusion as if somebody walks into a Harley dealership and says, "Oh no, we're not going to sell you a bike because you're not in the right demographic"? I mean, that's not happening. So I have to allow for the possibility that I simply don't get it, but I'll just tell you right now, I don't get it. So why do these corporations cater to this ESG investment and corporate governance model? Because, again, Wall Street expects it. The United Nations is pushing this. So let's look at Harley Davidson's ESG data book, as they say. So you go through here, and they're keeping track of their workers. How much comes from each demographic: male, female, Alaskan, Asian, so on. Then they go into their natural gas consumption. They track their carbon emissions. Big part of this ESG is what's your carbon footprint, and what are you doing to reach net zero, which means not that you don't have any emissions with your operations, it's that you've offset those emissions by buying credits, and people generate these credits by saying, "Hey, I've got all this land and I'm going to plant trees," or "I've got all this land and I'm not going to clear it." So you have brokers who have created a market for carbon credits. And these are the same institutions that were bagging on crypto. Crypto it's not real. Well, are these carbon credits real? You have to have somebody making a judgment as to what constitutes a credit and how they administer it, what it's worth, what somebody has to do to get the credit. I mean, it's kind of a scam. I hate to say it. It is a scam. And this was pushed by, world governments, the Kyoto Accords, the Paris Accords, and for the longest time I couldn't understand why companies like Harley Davidson or even the American car manufacturers are pushing EVs. It's okay for EVs to be part of the transportation solution, the part I never understood is why people are saying wholesale they've got to get rid of internal combustion engines and everything's got to be EVs, when if that were to happen overnight, we would need 25% more electrical generating capacity. We need more transmission and distribution capacity, which we don't have. Those types of infrastructure improvements aren't coming along at the pace they need to, even with the current rate of growth of EVs. And you get into the whole mining thing, you know. It takes a tremendous amount of hydrocarbon generation for the mining associated with rare earth elements. It's usually done in extremely poor countries by poor people under horrible working conditions. You know, it's not like the batteries can be recycled and reused indefinitely. The power generated to charge these EVs mostly comes from coal-burning power plants here in the United States. So I saw a presentation that indicated that once electric cars developed a range of over 200 miles, they ceased to be carbon neutral. The cost of production in terms of CO2 generated was much greater than what would be saved by not burning fuel for transportation. So the whole thing is a myth. So yeah, at first I thought, well, maybe these people are acting out of a misguided sense of what they think they need to do to address global warming. But that's not the case. And I want to be very specific about Harley Davidson here. Harley Davidson has jumped on the global climate change activist bandwagon. They've committed to completely eliminating internal combustion engines over a period of time. Here's a headline: Harley Davidson will go all electric. It says Harley Davidson is planning to phase out motorcycles powered by internal combustion engines and will slowly but surely transform into an all-electric brand. My question is why? I mean, it's not like there's an overwhelming market for electric motorcycles. In fact, the Livewire, when it debuted in 2019, it was a complete flop. You know, my local dealer, it sat around for 2.5 years before they finally discounted it and got them out of their showroom. In the 3.5 years since Harley launched the Livewire, they've sold about 1,500 of them at most. In that same time period, they sold over 600,000 internal combustion engine motorcycles. So the market isn't there. So again, why is Harley betting its future on EVs, on EV motorcycles? You know, they started Livewire, they spun it out as a separate division. They had an initial public offering back in September 2022. It didn't go well. They didn't raise as much money. The early investors bailed. Harley ended up having to up their stake from 70% to 90%. And Livewire's losing millions of dollars each year for Harley Davidson. So why would the CEO, who came in and completely did a 180 on their previous plan, which was to grow global markets, to offer lower cost motorcycles to appeal to new, younger riders, to bring more people into motorcycling, they abandoned that and they pulled out of 39 international markets because they said, hey, we've got to cut costs, we've got to streamline models, we've got to close dealerships, but oh, by the way, let's keep losing millions of dollars on Livewire to make electric motorcycles that no one wants to buy. So you have to ask yourself, why would Harley Davidson do this? I mean, this Seitz is, you know, seems like a smart guy. He was successful at Puma, but the problem is he has an agenda. And, you know, probably his biggest agenda is to stabilize the stock price and try and improve it where he can. Now, how much money do you think the CEO of Harley Davidson pulled in last year? Well, I'll just scroll down here and show you because it's actually more than I thought from previous research. He made $43.3 million in 2022. And a lot of that was tied to the stock performance. So he got awarded extra stock, he got payment incentives for increasing the value of the stock. The thing that always amazed me on these Harley Davidson earnings calls with analysts is all the softball questions they would lob at Harley. You know, questions I would have of them is, you know, some of your dealers or a lot of your dealers turn customers off. They're charging way over MSRP. if you sell a bike for 25% over MSRP, how's that same person going to trade it in for a new Harley in 3 years? They're going to be so underwater, they won't be able to do it. So are you cannibalizing future sales by these current sales practices? And of course, nobody asks those questions. And to the extent they ask any kind of hard question, Harley will just give some weaselly answer, and there's no follow-up. They just let it go. So what finally dawned on me, and I've been trying to figure this out for myself, is why is this massive societal restructuring occurring around EVs? And the short answer is, usually if you want to figure something out, follow the money. And if you follow the money here, you realize there's investment banks that are deciding how to spend these tax credits, what investments in so-called green energy can they make. They're picking winners and losers. And if you look at, they've got what's called Inclusive Stakeholder Management Report. And there's other companies that are issuing these kind of things. But let's talk about what they're after here. It says that they want to drive desirable positive impact for their stakeholders. By the way, they don't talk much about their customers in these documents. They want, on the planet, environmental sustainability. We take our environmental responsibility seriously, and we are consciously reducing the footprint we have on the planet. So they're reducing emissions, they're establishing criteria for future carbon credits, and looking at other things. And then social impact and prosperity. They're talking about their Milwaukee corporate campus. They're allowing everybody to continue to work from home. They're going to shut down that headquarters complex and turn it into a city park. At first I thought, well, maybe it's for a tax credit or what have you. What do you bet that is to reduce the carbon footprint? They could say, hey, we used to have all these people drive to work. We don't do that anymore, so we get a credit. A lot of people don't realize that Tesla actually sells carbon credits, carbon offsets, to competitors like Volkswagen. So there's this huge new asset class of trading carbon credits. And so you've got corporations now that are activists, and they're doing it to make money because, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And as far as Zeitz is concerned, most CEOs, they last, 3 or 4 years at major corporations, and then the board of directors gets rid of them or they go on to something else. This is what got Silicon Valley Bank in trouble. And they're talking about all the same stuff. Sustainability, accountability, diversity. And look where it got them. People got nervous, they made a lot of bad investments. There was a run on their deposits, and then the feds had to bail them out. And the ripple effects are still occurring throughout the economy. In fact, there's other banks that failed as a result. So is this ESG investing, as they say, even making sense? So the other thing, in researching Jochen Zeitz, he's been on the Harley board of directors since 2011. Here's an interview where he talks about how he had plans to electrify Harley early on.
Journey.
Well, I feel great about it. It's been quite a long journey. First as a board member over 10 years ago when I told the management that it was time to think electric, and that was literally 11, 12 years ago now. And after that, management started to invest into electric, and then little did I know that I would become CEO of Harley Davidson in 2020.
Now, this interview was done on a YouTube channel for the B team. And I started asking myself, well, what is the B team? Turns out the B team was founded in 2013 by Richard Branson of Virgin Companies in England and Jochen Zeitz, after he'd already been with Harley Davidson, at least on their board of directors. You start looking through here. Most of these people they're industry leaders, if you will, and most of them are from Europe, by the way, and a lot of them have affiliations with the United Nations. So you can see here Branson, Zeitz, The guy who's the CEO of I.C.E, a person here that was General Secretary of the Trade Union Group, people from finance, from healthcare, pharmaceuticals, CNN, list goes on. So let's look at what they call their movement. And by the way, I mentioned that Zeitz is an environmental activist. He embraces the term. There was a recent interview with Morgan Stanley where they lobbed a bunch of softball questions, and the interviewer actually referred to him as an environmental activist, and Zeitz embraced that term. But again, the agenda that is illustrated on the B team here is also clearly at work at Harley Davidson these days. So they talk about climate change getting worse. Everybody's got to transition apparently to net zero economy. So in essence, what these people are saying is, look, you've got to get like-minded people who run major corporations to start implementing the changes that we think is best for everybody. So they talk about reaching net zero by 2050. I don't know why that number keeps coming up. Now let's look at their mission here. Sustainability, no future beyond planetary boundaries. Does that mean they're against people trying to go to Mars? I think what they mean is they don't want consumption of natural resources that they don't think can sustain current or future populations. I guess. I'm not really clear on that. Equality, no justice without respect for human rights. Keep in mind, Harley has a lot of relationships with companies in China. What do you think of China's human rights record? Accountability, no trust without transparency and responsibility. I mean, this is just like blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about their strategic priorities. So they talk about inclusive economy. I mean, you keep hearing that word over and over. I mean, how inclusive is Harley Davidson right now when most people can't afford their motorcycles? Workplace equality. I mean, is this a problem right now? I mean, I think part of my issue with this whole movement is, be a diverse company, have a diverse customer base. But what's with all the scorekeeping? I'm from Kansas City area. I've been a Chiefs fan for many years. Chiefs won the Super Bowl this year against the Philadelphia Eagles. And in the run-up to the Super Bowl, I'm thinking, okay, what are the stats for the various players, especially the quarterbacks? How well do they perform under pressure? I was thinking about metrics. Instead, all the media could talk about was how historic that Super Bowl was, because for the first time it featured two black starting quarterbacks. And I'm thinking, that never crossed my mind. I'm just thinking about them as players. I mean, do they think of themselves as black players, or do they think of themselves as players in the NFL? I mean, you'd have to ask them. But, I kind of like Morgan Freeman's take on this type of thing.
I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it.
So, I know I went on some details here. I'm trying to paint the whole picture. To me, the whole thing is just rather shocking. So you've got this agenda of climate activists who are business leaders, and they're pushing an agenda of taxation, legal frameworks, trading tax credits, keeping track of the company's carbon footprint, setting up a new set of assets that can be bought and sold. And as long as you're part of the system, you're going to be rewarded by being in positions of power, you're going to be on boards of directors, and you're going to make multi-million-dollar salaries. I mean, what's not to like, except for the fact that they're going to run Harley Davidson in the ground? I mean, eventually they're going to get tired of losing money at Livewire. They just won't be able to sustain it. And all these policies aren't going to save them. So people have been talking a lot about Budweiser and Bud Light and their way of targeting new customer groups. But what people are reacting to is the agenda, I think, and being forced to have certain viewpoints in a way. And these elitists, these globalists, socialists, they think they know better than everybody else, and now they're in positions of power at major corporations. So they're completely changing how these companies are doing business. And it's not because they necessarily have deeply held beliefs about the environment. I mean, Zeitz gives this interview where he talks about, you know, going to one of his Puma factories and realizing that they they had pollution emitted from the plant. Well, yeah. I mean, does he think that the parts suppliers in China that are making parts for Harleys don't have issues with pollution, don't have issues with corruption, don't have issues with human rights abuses? I mean, you tell me.
At the same time, while I was running Puma, I visited our factories, and there was no CSR, let alone sustainability at the time. You just saw the waste coming out of the factory straight into the river, really making you sick just standing there. So
some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country, and some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
So this isn't how I thought it was going to turn out. There's a lot of people that didn't like the fact that Harley was being run by a German, a European. I wasn't hung up on his nationality, but I understand now where people were coming from, because you can't just have somebody from another country run Harley without running the risk that they're going to be an agent of all this globalist, socialist mindset. And that's exactly what's happened. So, the board of directors of Harley are cut from the same cloth. Zeitz was on the board when they threw Levitich overboard in 2020. So he's been part of steering Harley since 2011. So these people are well established, they have an agenda, and they really don't care that they're not serving their core customers. I mean, what other business can you think of that basically says they want to kill their core product that they're selling to the majority of their core customers, and they just want to phase it out altogether? And the answer is Philip Morris, makers of Marlboro cigarettes. I mean, they make billions of cigarettes a year. They have about 42% market share, and they're committed to what they say is a smoke-free future. It's striking to me the parallels between Harley Davidson and Philip Morris. So in broad strokes, companies that sell products that apparently are no longer politically correct. Nobody's making Philip Morris continue to make cigarettes. They're waiting for people to legislate it out of existence, which, by the way, I think Harley Davidson knows this is going to happen. Do you think with their commitment of going totally electric that they're investing much money, if at all, in their next generation internal combustion engine, whether it's a new version of the Milwaukee 8 or a new version of the Revolution Max liquid-cooled engine? It's highly unlikely. So let me know what you think about this. I mean, do you like the fact that Harley Davidson's run by a globalist, environmental activist that is promoting his version of social equity and justice? Or would you rather have a CEO of Harley focusing on making better, more affordable motorcycles for the customers that they actually have right now and are likely to have in the future, instead of pushing electric motorcycles down everybody's throat? So again, let me know what you think. A lot to unpack here. I hope I kept you with the thread that I was trying to show here, is that these executives want to rule the world. And they're affecting change daily through the companies that they manage. And they're going to do it whether their customers like it or not. They'll even tell their customers to the face that we're going to get rid of our core product. It's going to be gone. So where do they go from here? Harley's plan is to sell as many electric motorcycles as the market will bear, which isn't very many right now, and shift to selling $1 billion of apparel every year. That's really what they want to do. So again, let me know your thoughts. Appreciate you hanging with me in this video. If you enjoy this type of content, please comment, share, and like, and please stay tuned for future videos. Thanks very much.